Sadhguru, if the creation is perfect, and the Creator has done such a good job on us, as you say, why is there so much suffering in the world? Why do we need to depend on somebody's compassion to exist here?
So, if Creator had done a good job on us, why there is so much suffering in the world? Why we need to depend on other people's compassion and understanding to exist here? This is like, it happened once. A little boy came home with a $10 bill. What, Luke? In Ohio. A little boy came home with a $10 bill. His mother asked, he said, "I found it." His mother asked, "Luke, did you really find it? Are you sure?" He said, "Sure, ma'am, I even saw the man looking for it." Why there's so much misery if this is a perfect job? It's such a perfect job that it gives you the opportunity to be whichever way you wish to be. If creation had not given you the necessary opportunity to be what you wish to be, then there would be no possibilities, isn't it? Then there would be no such thing as liberation. So why create a bondage and then liberation? Why couldn't you be liberated? Then there would be no creation. Only because there is creation, now the possibility of going beyond that. Now, in animal nature and in other forms of life that you see around you, every kind, there is not much possibility. The possibility is just to survive, procreate, carry on with life and die one day. Because there is not much possibility, there is not much misery either. You don't see other creatures of the planet suffering like human beings. Their suffering is purely physical. If they are physically harmed, they are in pain. Even in pain, they do not know the kind of suffering that a human being knows. Human being knows this suffering not because creation gave this suffering to you. Creation just gave you the freedom to make whatever you wish to out of yourself. You're making suffering out of yourself, or a large population of the world has decided to make suffering out of themselves. That is their choice. Physical realities sometimes are comfortable, sometimes are not comfortable. That is so. We have been given the necessary intelligence to create necessary comfort for ourselves. That's not an issue really. If we have no problems with each other, creating comfort for all the population in the world is not a problem. It's not at all a big problem, really. Simply because we have inner problems, simply because this freedom, which should have been a benediction, has become a curse upon humanity. Right now, what human beings are suffering is not their bondage, they're suffering their freedom. If you suffer your bondage, it's all right. But if you suffer your freedom, that's tragedy. Right now, human beings are unfortunately suffering their freedom. This moment, you can make anything out of yourself. You can make joy out of yourself, you can make suffering out of yourself. What to do if 50% of the people or 90% of the people are choosing to make misery out of themselves? That's not creation's fault. Just gave you the freedom so that you could go beyond. Once you have come as human, you are not trapped anymore. Other creatures are trapped in their own instincts. Beyond that, they cannot think. You have instincts for survival, but still you have the possibility of going beyond these instincts. If you don't choose to go beyond, that means still enough suffering has not touched you. Because it's unfortunate in the world that very few people transcend out of their intelligence. Most people have to be thrashed by life, only then they will transcend. Only then they will think of going beyond, otherwise, no. I don't know if you're aware of this, Luke, you came early, but in India, if you if you tell somebody that I'm living in an ashram, they will ask you, why, what went wrong, what happened to your life? So they believe only after something really goes wrong, you'll go to the ashram, okay? Because most people's intelligence is such, because they kept their brains in cold storage, they think they're going to use it in future. So, they can only seek anything beyond when something really goes wrong with their life. Till then, even if something really goes wrong, they will only pray for a better life next time. Now, you don't have to depend on anybody's compassion or understanding. The whole world can live under the umbrella of your compassion and your understanding. I would like to see that you stand up that way, that the world lives under your compassion and understanding. You don't live in other people's compassion and understanding. If you have any dignity, that's how you should live, isn't it? Isn't it so?
Sadhguru, you said the suffering is of mind and we have the freedom to get rid of it. However, there are people who don't even have food to eat. What about their suffering?
People don't have food to eat not because there's no food in the world, because people who are capable have grabbed everything.
There are people without food, like the situations we have in Africa, Ethiopia, and even in India.
You're telling me? Unfortunately, we have left a large population of the world, human population, in physical pain. Pains of hunger, pains of disease, pains of injury, various types of physical pains we are creating. The way we are treating half the humanity on the planet looks like we are hell's angels. We are not human beings. We are not really human beings if you look at the world, because half the population in the world, we really kept them in hell. But still, if you don't know this, people who are in comfort and well-being, their level of suffering is much deeper than those people who are not eating properly, even today. That's the reality. So suffering is not necessarily always in proportion to one's physical deprivation. People who have everything, they suffer much more deeply than people who don't have anything. And just that you have too much and somebody is suffering from too little, that itself will cause you immense suffering. You may not be aware of it. It may take time for a lot of people to realize that in some way, every morsel of food that you eat and every hungry stomach in the world is connected, whether you like it or you don't like it. I'm not trying to make a situation where you can't enjoy your dinner or breakfast. That's not the idea. But it is connected, whether you like it or you don't like it. I think it's good. Before you, every day, you sit in front of your food, take a minute's break before you eat and think of all the people who are not eating today and still eat well. Understand? Still eat well, knowing fully well that there is something that you can do by eating well. By not eating well, you will not do anything. But by eating well, you can do something. Then this food will not go waste on you. Then something will happen out of this. Because if you make this one aware of what is what, this one which you call as human can't keep quiet. It has to do something. By somehow insulating yourself, thinking that's not your business, that is God's work. Right now he asked, this is Creator's mistake that so many people are suffering. By doing this, you're trying to insulate yourself against other people's suffering, because there is something in you which is connected to everything in the existence. If you make that active in whichever way possible, that something in you won't let you keep quiet. I would say, if just 1% of the population stands up really in a committed way to elevate human suffering, at least the physical suffering in the existence could be just wiped out, The whole 100% need not stand up, just 1%. If they stand up, it can be done. Now, just whatever this action for rural rejuvenation is an effort in that direction. But just see how many people are willing to really stand up. Very few. Lot of them are, I'm happy, lot of young people are standing up, but still it is very, very few, isn't it? And to what extent am I willing to stand up and do it? That's always questionable, because somewhere we try to insulate ourselves with our own philosophies. One of my basic missions is to make life bare. I want you to see life bare as it is. And the bare is not ugly, the bare is very beautiful. The bare is very tremendous. It is only because you have wrapped life in all kinds of philosophies. It is only because you have wrapped life in your ideas, in your emotions, in things that you created. You don't see the beauty of it, nor do you see the pain of it. If you see both, then there would be enormous compassion in you, but still no pain in you, there would be joy in you, even though there is so much misery. Because you have not looked at life the way it is, you're looking at it through your ideas, through your emotions. Either you insulate yourself from other people's pain, or you insulate yourself from the very joy of life. Both could be alive in you at the same time. Enormous compassion for all the pain in the world, and still you go through this joyfully. if you looked at life just the way it is, not distorting it according to your emotions, your identifications, all these things. If you really respond to life simply the way it is, you wouldn't even think in terms of human suffering and other suffering. Anything that disturbs life, anything that hampers life, you would see how to, create a situation that it is not so. Why only your compassion goes out to human beings, not to other creatures? You think they're lesser life than you? So you're too identified with your own form, isn't it? So you think only human suffering is suffering. Human beings are capable of suffering just about anything. Isn't it so? You know better than anybody. Human beings are capable of suffering just about anything. If some physical reason is there, at least they have a good excuse. Otherwise, they will simply suffer for nothing. Haven't you seen enough people simply suffering for anything and everything? They suffer their failure, they suffer their success, they suffer their poverty, they suffer their richness, they suffer their health and their ill health and everything. You send them to heaven, they will suffer because they'll miss hell. They are capable of suffering just about anything. Now, people are suffering the world, there are people suffering the ashram also, aren't they? Are you one of them? People who come from outside think this is heaven. Oh, looking at the mountain I can spend my lifetime, people are saying, if not anything else. If I don't see other aspects of the ashram, just looking at these mountains I can spend the rest of my life. That is what a lot of people say who come here. But there are many people who are suffering the ashram. So, people are capable of suffering just about anything. I think more people in the world are suffering of indigestion than of hunger. Isn't it so? Unfortunately, that's a reality. There is a large number of people suffering hunger. Still hungry people in the world, though so much technology, so much things have happened, and we have so much crop that we have to dump it into the ocean. Food crops are being dumped into the ocean. Millions of tons of milk is dumped into the ocean every year. But still there are people hungry, still there are children dying without food. Because somewhere, we gotten all distorted in our heads. The physical suffering is happening mainly, it's all man-made. If you lived in nature, the physical suffering would be very minimal, and your bodies would be in such a way, it's not easy to make a man who lives in nature to suffer physically. Because every day he would go through everything and his body would be such that he wouldn't suffer an insect bite. But today, everything you suffer, mosquito bites, people want to leave the ashram and go. Because our bodies have become like that now, isn't it? Physical suffering is not the biggest issue. Yes, it is. But what I would say is, with the resources that we have in the world, if a few people make up their minds, within a very short time, physical suffering, hunger and poverty could be taken off, But the problem is, if you take away that hunger and poverty, people will just multiply in hordes. And the 6 billion, we will make it into 12 billion in another 25 years. And once again we'll multiply physical suffering. It's an endless process. Somewhere, nature has its own simply straightforward ways. We think it's cruel, but nature has its own very straightforward ways of settling life. If you are caught up in that, unfortunate. It is no fortune or misfortune, but for an individual it's unfortunate because he suffers that. We can do something about the physical suffering, but people creating suffering for themselves every day, suffering anger, suffering fear, suffering hatred, suffering jealousy, suffering insecurity, this is all yours, isn't it? And that is the maximum suffering in the world. Physical is just a small part. Even in Africa, the physical suffering is just a small part. The real suffering is in the mind, isn't it? And one can easily go beyond that if they're willing. This mind can be made an instrument. You can make your mind into an instrument which takes you towards joy, which takes you towards ecstasy instead of suffering. Or if there's no food in the stomach, how to be joyful? If you don't know this, this Isha Yoga Center is not practicing that, but many yogis intentionally starve themselves for many days, many days, till they become all skin and bone and still remain blissful and joyful. So even beyond physical suffering it's possible. Now I am not talking that person in the village somewhere who is hungry, that person in Africa who is hungry, why doesn't he just sit in a cross-legged posture and meditate? That's not what I'm saying. That is all caused by us. We are eating more than what we should eat, we are using up more than what we should use up, we are possessing more than what we should possess. That is why a large population is hungry. If you do not know this, about 1% of the world's population owns over 70% of the world's resources. You know this? Just 1% of the world's population owns over 70% of the world's resources and wealth. So it is just in the hands of 1%. If they just make up their mind, it's over. In a few days' time, it could be settled. But still, humanity is yet to become alive. Human nature is yet to become alive. People are just centered in their egos, not in their original nature. If people were centered in their original nature, there would be no such thing, It happened once. I think it was Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu went through a bad phase in his life where he was accused of all kinds of terrible things. But then he regained his position in the society as a wise man. So his fame and name spread around that he is among the wisest men in the whole country. So one day, the king got over-enthusiastic and said, "You are the wisest man in my country, so you must be the judge, the chief judge in our country." Lao Tzu said, "Are you sure? My wisdom and your interests may not be in the same line." No, you are the wisest man, why will anything go wrong? It must be great to have you as a judge. Lao Tzu said, "Okay." The very first case was, there was a servant who was working in a rich man's house for a pittance. Right from his childhood, he's been in this rich man's house. He was bought as a bonded labor. He was barely given anything except his food. And now he has grown up in this house for over 30 years now. One day, he stole all the jewels in the house and escaped. Then the rich man complained and they caught this guy and they brought him to the court. Then the rich man came being really abusive and said, this fool, I brought him up right from his childhood. I gave him everything. He had nothing, he would have died on the street. But I gave him everything and I brought him up, I made a man out of him. And here he is, he steals me, you must give him death sentence. Lao Tzu heard both the sides and then he awarded his judgment. He said, this man, he must be allowed to keep half the jewels that he has stolen. The other half should go to the king's treasury. And the rich man should be put in prison for 10 years. Now, the whole court was shell-shocked. And they thought this man is crazy and immediately they went and complained to the king. He's out of his head. We bring a thief to him who is caught red-handed, he gives him half the booty and the other half to the king's treasury and puts the rich man in prison for 10 years who is a victim of the crime. And the king was aghast. He called Lao Tzu and asked, what did you do? I thought you're a wise man. He said, yes. The thing is, this boy has grown up in that house. He is like a child in that house. He is the son of that house. He may be born elsewhere, but he was brought up in that house. Every day he's seen all the riches around him, jewels and good food and this and that, everything around him, but he was never allowed to touch anything, for which he must have suffered a lot, these 30 years of growing up in that house, that he is a part of that house but he is never allowed to touch anything or have anything. And so he did his rightful thing. He took the jewels and went because it anyway belongs to him. He grew up in that house. But without telling the owner he went, so I'm depriving him of half the jewels and putting half of it in king's treasury. And this man, for committing such a crime, that having a child in the house and not giving him anything and tempting him with all these things every day and not giving it to him, we put him in prison for 10 years. Do you know, if you go by this wisdom, what will happen to the world? So, instead of just asking questions, that is something we can do. Instead of doing what we can do, we will always be talking about what we cannot do. You can't go and wipe out the poverty in Africa right now. But there is something you can do. For people who are right around here, right through this 7-day program, people went on bringing Africa. I thought from where they fell in love with Africa suddenly. Because they saw a few documentaries on the BBC or maybe they're reading National Geographic. Right around you, more than 50% of the country's population have not eaten properly. You can see that in their bodies. They have not even grown to their full stature, physical stature. And there is no compassion. Somewhere in Africa people are dying, there is compassion. I am not saying you should not have compassion for them, but what I am saying is, if you have compassion for Africa, you can eat well, sit at home and shed a few tears and go on eating. But if you have compassion for people around you, you will have to do something. That's the big difference. I think let something happen around you before we go to Africa. You make this action for rural rejuvenation such a big possibility here. that maybe we will take it to Africa, I don't know. But if we don't have eyes to see the suffering around us, but we are talking about Africa all the time, then it's no good. Because there is very little you can do about that right now. There is a lot you can do about what is here right now. I'm not saying we cannot do anything at all, but when there is so much you can do right here, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't care whether somebody is an African or an American or an Indian or what. A human being is a human being. I think it's always better that from around us you handle things rather than trying to handle somewhere else, because you'll just dissipate your energies. You'll waste your life talking about it, not doing anything about it. If you're really keen on doing something about human suffering, you must attend to yourself first and also people around you. That's the best way to start. If our capabilities increase beyond a certain point, then we can go somewhere else.
Dear Sadhguru, how can I actually know life around me?
Only life can know life. A thought cannot know life, an emotion cannot know life, an ego cannot know life. Only life can know life. If you stop being a bundle of thoughts, opinions and emotions, just exist here as life, just throbbing, pulsating life, knowing life is just natural. So what we are referring to as enlightenment is just this. Instead of being a thought, instead of being an emotion, instead of being an ego, you just become life. Simply life. In a way, it is the most basic thing. Enlightenment is not the ultimate thing. Yes, it is in one way. In another way, it's the most basic thing, because first thing your life, then everything else, isn't it? Only because you're alive, you are capable of thought. Only because you're alive, you're capable of emotion. Only because you're alive, you're capable of ego. So the most basic thing is life. So, this is like becoming very basic, just life, pure life, nothing else. All other things are there, but you're never identified with it. Experientially, intellectually knowing, I am not this, I am not that, doesn't liberate a person. Something more deeper is needed. Right now, the center of your existence is your identities or your identification. All identities are taken on, put on identities. So the very center of your existence is something in put on, not in reality. So when you're not in reality, the question of experiencing life as it is doesn't arise. Now you said, you want to know just life, the way it is in the flowers, in the moon, in the clouds. Today is a cloudy day, there is no possibility of moon. But anyway, if you just become life, there are no clouds, there is no moon, there is no flowers. There is simply pulsating life. Just as you are, everything is. Flowers, clouds, mountains, moon exists because you have become something other than life. If you become just life, none of those things exist. only life exists. Just this pulsating mass of energy. You can call it creation, you can call it creator, or you can call it myself. It's the same thing. What you call it, it doesn't matter. But it's just life. Some of it manifest, most of it unmanifest, but still life. Because I call everything life because all of it is in some kind of moment, all of it is some kind of possibility. Every atom in the existence is a possibility, so it's life. What you call as life is just a possibility. What you make out of it is all that it is, isn't it? It happened one day. A radio jockey who thought of himself as a star was traveling in bus to his work. Then he heard a woman's voice in the back seat tell the kid, "Tommy, do you want to listen to Alfonso show?" The man's chest swelled in pride that he's a star. There are people who want their children to listen to his show. The boy immediately snapped back saying, "No." Then the mother said, "Then you better behave yourself."
Since I've come here, one day I'm in love, another day I'm sad. One day I'm friendly, and another day I'm a barking dog. These moods happened before, but here I realized that these emotions are happening without any reason.
No, you're just discovering your madness, it's okay. It's monsoon time, you know. Anytime it'll cloud, anytime rain, anytime sunshine, it's monsoon. All these days you thought your emotions, your thoughts, your problems had something to do with somebody. It's good you're beginning to realize it's nothing to do with anybody, it's just your own madness. For 2 months, that's pretty good, Meenakshi. Lot of people take a whole lifetime to realize that. They're 70 years of age and they still think their emotions and their thoughts have something to do with somebody. They don't understand that the seat of your experience is within you. The seat of your experience is within you, isn't it? For most people, it takes a whole lifetime and still they don't realize it. In 2 months, if you are beginning to realize that the madness is yours, nobody has anything to do with it, then I think you will look for a solution. The solution is that we have to just dissolve you. There's really no other solution. I've been telling you right from day one, there's only one problem in the world, that's you. If you dissolve this one problem, there is no other problem in the world. There's really no other problem in the world. So, for dissolving you, sulfuric acid won't do. You need something more powerful than that. So, that's what we loaded this place with. Here, if you have little sense, little bit, if your door opens a little bit, a millimeter, this will seep into you and dissolve you. If you are tightly shut, then it'll bother you, it'll finger you. It'll make you do insane things because that's the nature of the energy. It won't let you be where you are. It just keeps putting you on a fast forward. The very purpose of creating a space like this is to put your life on a fast forward. What most people realize at 70, I want you to realize when you're 18. If you're already past that, at least now it's time you realized that the seat of your experience is within you, not in somebody else. Your thoughts, your emotions, your nonsense has nothing to do with anybody but you. If you just understand that, you know you are the problem. At least, once you know what is the problem, solution becomes easy. When you don't know what's the problem, there is no solution for you, isn't it? Isn't it so? When you do not know what is the problem, where is the question of finding a solution? You just suffer the problem. At least now you know what is the problem. Then solution is not too far away.